especially suited for such domestic occupations as usually follow that meal, then it would be well to exchange it before the time for receiving visitors, if the mistress be in the habit of doing so. It is still to be remembered, however, that in changing the dress, jewellery and ornaments are not to be worn until the full dress for dinner is assumed. The advice of Polonius to his son Laertes in Shakespeare's tragedy of Hamlet is most excellent, and although given to one of the male sex, will equally apply to a fair lady. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy, rich, not gaudy, for the apparel oft proclaims the man. Okay, so this next section is charity and benevolence are duties which a mistress owes to herself as well as to her fellow creatures, and there is scarcely any income so small but something may be spared from it, even if it be but the widow's mite. It is to be always remembered, however, that it is the spirit of charity which imparts to the gift a value far beyond its actual amount, and is by far its better part. True charity, a plant divinely nursed, fed by the love from which it rose at first, thrives against hope, and in the rudest scene, storms but enliven its unfading green. Exuberant is the shadow it supplies, its fruit on earth, its growth above the skies. So Mrs. Beeton likes to pepper her advice with quotes, as you saw the Shakespeare quote, and also little poems. Visiting the houses of the poor is the only practical way really to understand the actual state of each family, and although there may be difficulties in following out this plan in the metropolis and other large cities, yet in country towns and rural districts these objections do not obtain. Great advantages may result from visits paid to the poor, for there being unfortunately much ignorance generally amongst them with respect to all household knowledge. There will be opportunities for advising and instructing them in a pleasant and unobtrusive manner, in cleanliness, industry, cookery, and good management. It's extremely patronising, don't you agree? But it is a thing of its time. Remember that this was published in 1836. In marketing, that the best articles are the cheapest may be laid down as a rule, and it is desirable, unless an experienced and confidential housekeeper be kept, that the mistress should herself purchase all provisions and stores needed for the house. If the mistress be a young wife, and not accustomed to order things for the house, a little practice and experience will soon teach her who are the best tradespeople to deal with, and what are the best provisions to buy. Under each particular head of fish, meat, poultry, game, etc., will be described the proper means of ascertaining the quality of these comestibles. A housekeeping account book should invariably be kept, and kept punctually and precisely. The plan for keeping household accounts which we should recommend would be to make an entry, that is, write down into a daily diary every amount paid on that particular day, be it ever so small. Then, at the end of the month, let these various payments be ranged under their specific heads of easily be explained, and the housekeeper will have the satisfaction of knowing whether her efforts to manage her department well and economically have been successful. Okay, let's have a bit more coffee before we go on to engaging domestics. Okay. Engaging domestics is one of those duties in which the judgment of the mistress must be keenly exercised. There are some respectable registry offices where good servants may sometimes be hired, but the plan rather to be recommended is for the mistress to make inquiry. Amongst her circle of friends and acquaintances, and her tradespeople, the latter generally know those in their neighbourhood who are wanting situations and will communicate with them, when a personal interview with some of them will enable the mistress to form some idea of the characters of the applicants and to suit herself accordingly. We would here point out in error, and a grave one it is, into which some mistresses fall. They do not, when engaging a servant, expressly tell her all the duties which she will be expected to perform. This is an act of omission severely to be reprehended. Every portion of work which the maid will have to do should be plainly stated by the mistress and understood by the servant. If this plan is not carefully adhered to, domestic contention is almost certain to ensue, and this may not be easily settled, so that a change of servants, which is so much to be deprecated, is continually occurring. The following table of the average yearly wages paid to domestics with the various members of the household, placed in the order in which they are usually ranked, will serve as a guide to regulate the expenditure of an establishment. When found in livery. I don't really know what that means actually. Anyway, the house steward from £10 to £80, the valet. Now I'm not quite sure what that little quotation mark means there. Anyway, the butler, the cook, the gardener, the footman, the under-butler, the coachman, the groom, the under-footman, the page or footboy, the stable boy. Okay, I've just read that sentence, it makes absolutely no sense, so I'm going to carry on. The housekeeper from £20 to £15, the lady's maid, the head nurse, the cook, the upper housemaid, the upper laundry maid, the maid of all work, the under housemaid, the still room maid, the nursemaid, the under laundry maid, the kitchen maid, and the scullery maid. I think the problem when this has been transcribed into a new format, that perhaps, and some of these numbers haven't been properly transcribed, I think, which is why it's a bit confusing. Anyway, option, about £200 or £150 a year, a maid of all work, and then in brackets, and girl occasionally. So I reckon you're probably middle class, the bottom of the scale there, maybe lower middle class. Okay, having thus indicated some of the more general duties of the mistress relative to the moral government of her household, we will now give a few specific instructions on matters having a more practical relation to the position which she is supposed to occupy in the eye of the world. To do this the more clearly, we will begin with her earliest duties and take her completely through the occupations of a day. Right, before we do that, let's have a bit of coffee to start. Yummy. Okay. Having risen early, as we have already advised, and having given due attention to the bath, and made a careful toilet, it will be well at once to see that the children have received their proper ablutions. I love this terminology, and are in every way clean and comfortable. The first meal of the day, breakfast, will then be served, at which all the family should be punctually present, unless illness or other circumstances prevent. After breakfast is over, it will be well for the mistress to make a round of the kitchen and other offices to see that all are in order, and that the morning's work has been properly performed by the various domestics. The orders for the day should then be given, and any questions which the domestics desire to ask respecting the several departments should be answered, and any special articles they may require handed to them from the store closet. In those establishments where there is a housekeeper, it will not be so necessary for the mistress personally to perform the above-named duties. After this general superintendence of her servants, the mistress, if a mother of a young family, may devote herself to the instruction of some of its younger members, or to the examination of the state of their wardrobe, leaving the later portion of the morning for reading or for some amusing recreation. Recreation, says Bishop Hall, is intended to the mind, as whetting is to the scythe to sharpen the edge of it, which would otherwise grow dull and blunt. He, therefore, that spends his whole time in recreation is ever whetting, never mowing. His grass may grow, and his steed starve, as, contrarily, he that always toils and never recreates is ever mowing, never whetting, labouring much to little purpose. As God no scythe as to no edge, then only doth the work go forward when the scythe is so seasonably and moderately whetted, that it may cut, and so cut, that it may have the help of sharpening. I hope you've all got that. Unless the means of the mistress be very circumscribed, and she be obliged to devote a great deal of her time to the making of her children's clothes and other economical pursuits, it is right that she should give some time to the pleasures of literature, the innocent delights of the garden, and to the improvement of any special abilities for music, painting, and other elegant arts which she may happily possess. These duties and pleasures being performed and enjoyed, the hour of luncheon will have arrived. This is a very necessary meal between early breakfast and a late dinner, as a healthy person with good exercise should have a fresh supply of food once in 4 hours. It should be a light meal, but its solidity must of course be in some degree proportionate to the time it is intended is served, that will of course take the place of the luncheon. In many houses, where a nursery dinner is provided for the children at about 1 o'clock, the mistress and the elder portion of the family make their luncheon at the same time, from the same joint or whatever may be provided. A mistress will arrange, according to circumstances, the serving of the meal, but the more usual plan is for the lady of the house to have the joint brought to her table and afterwards carried to the nursery. After luncheon, morning calls and visits may be made and received. These may be divided under 3 heads: those of ceremony, friendship, and congratulation or condolence. Visits of ceremony or courtesy, which occasionally merge into those of friendship, are to be paid under various circumstances. Thus, they are uniformly required after dining at a friend's house, or after a ball, picnic, or any other party. These visits should be short, a stay of from 15 to 20 minutes being quite sufficient. A lady paying a visit may remove her boa or neckerchief, but neither her shawl nor bonnet. When other visitors are announced, it is well to retire as soon as possible, taking care to let it appear that their arrival is not the cause. When they are quietly seated and the bustle of their entrance is over, rise from your chair, taking a kind leave of the hostess and bowing politely to the guests. Should you call at an inconvenient time, not having ascertained the luncheon hour, or from any other inadvertence, retire as soon as possible, without, however, showing that you feel yourself an intruder. It is not difficult for any well-bred or even good-tempered person to know what to say on such an occasion, and on politely withdrawing, a promise can be made to call again, if the lady you have called on appear really disappointed. In paying visits of friendship, it will not be so necessary to be guided by etiquette as in paying visits of ceremony, and if a lady be pressed by her friend to remove her shawl and bonnet, it can be done if it will not interfere with her subsequent arrangements. It is, however, requisite to call at suitable times, and to avoid staying too long if your friend is engaged. The courtesies of society should ever be maintained, even in the domestic circle, and amongst the nearest of friends. During these visits, the manners should be easy and cheerful, and the subjects of conversation such as may be readily terminated. Serious discussions or arguments are to be altogether avoided, and there is much danger and impropriety in expressing opinions of those persons and characters with whom perhaps there is but a slight acquaintance. It is not advisable at any time to take favourite dogs into another lady's drawing room, for many persons have an absolute dislike to such animals, and besides this, there is always a chance of a breakage of some article occurring. Through their leaping and bounding here and there, sometimes very much to the fear and annoyance of the hostess. Her children also, unless they are particularly well trained and orderly, and she is on exceedingly friendly terms with the hostess, should not accompany a lady in making morning calls. Where a lady, however, pays her visits in a carriage, the children can be taken in the vehicle and remain in it unless the visit is over. Wow. Keep the children in the car. Okay, let's have a bit more coffee. For morning calls, it is well to be neatly attired, for a costume very different to that you generally these visits, if your acquaintance or friend be not at home, a card should be left. If in a carriage, the servant will answer your inquiry and receive your card. If paying your visits on foot, give your card to the servant in the hall, but leave to go in and rest should on no account be asked. The form of words "not at home" may be understood in different senses, but the only courteous way is to receive them as being perfectly true. You may imagine that the lady of the house is really at home, and that she would make an exception in your favour, or you may think that your acquaintance is not desired, but in either case not the slightest word is to escape you, which would suggest on your part such an impression. So if she says she's not home, but you think she is, you've just got to ignore it and leave. She may be hiding behind the sofa. In receiving morning calls, the foregoing description of the etiquette to be observed in paying them will be of considerable service. It is to be added, however, that the occupations of drawing, music, or reading should be suspended on the entrance of morning visitors. If a lady, however, be engaged with light needlework, and none other is appropriate in the drawing room, it may not be, under some circumstances, inconsistent with good breeding to quietly continue it during conversation, particularly if the visit be protracted or the visitors be gentlemen. The morning calls being paid or received, and their etiquette properly attended to, the next great event of the day in most establishments is the dinner, and we only purpose here to make a few general remarks on this important topic, as in future pages the whole art of dining will be thoroughly considered with reference to its economy, comfort, and enjoyment. In giving or accepting an invitation for dinner, the following is the form of words generally made use of. They, however, can be varied in proportion to the intimacy or position of the hosts and guests. So, Mr. and Mrs. A present their compliments to Mr. and Mrs. B, and request the honour or hope to have the pleasure of their company to dinner on Wednesday the 6th of December next. A Street, November 13th, 1859, RSVP. The letters in the corner imply "Répondez, s'il vous plaît," meaning an answer will oblige. The reply accepting the invitation is couched in the following terms: Mr. and Mrs. B present their compliments to Mr. and Mrs. A, and will do themselves the honour of, or will have much pleasure in, accepting their kind invitation to dinner on the 6th of December next. B Square, November 18th, 1859. Cards or invitations for a dinner party should be issued a fortnight or 3 weeks, sometimes even a month, beforehand, and care should be taken by the hostess in the selection of the invited guests that they should be suited to each other. Much also of the pleasure of a dinner party will depend on the arrangement of the guests at table, so as to form a due admixture of talkers and listeners, the grave and the gay. If an invitation to dinner is accepted, the guests should be punctual, and the mistress ready in her drawing room to receive them. At some periods it has been considered fashionable to come late to dinner, but lately nous avons mistress, however, must display no kind of agitation, but show her tact in suggesting light and cheerful subjects of conversation, which will be much aided by the introduction of any particular new book, curiosity of art, or article of virtue, which may pleasantly engage the attention of the company. Waiting for dinner, however, is a trying time, and there are a few who have not felt how sad it is to sit and pine the long half-hour before we dine, upon our watches off to look, then wonder at the clock and cook, and strive to laugh in spite of fate, but laughter forced soon quits the room, and leaves it in its former gloom. But lo, the dinner now appears, the object of our hopes and fears, the end of all our pain. That's hilarious. Okay, I think I'm going to end there, and we'll take up this part, dinner being announced, in the next video. Hope you enjoyed that bit of etiquette from Mrs. Beeton's book of household management, 1861. This has been Kate at the Library of Whispers saying, I shall see you very, very soon.